To understand 2008's Prince of Persia reboot, one must first remember the world into which it was born. The year 2008 was a time of immense global instability. The US and much of the world were grappling with the subprime mortgage crisis and the subsequent collapse of Lehman Brothers, which plunged the global economy into a deep recession. Politically, a new age was dawning with the election of Barack Obama. But international conflicts, such as the Russo-Georgian War, reminded everyone that the world was still a precarious place. Many dominant video games of the era reflected this gritty reality. Games like Gears of War and Fallout 3 favored a bleak, desaturated palette and a cynical narrative. This cultural milieu was a breeding ground for realism and hard truths. Yet, into this turbulent and grim landscape, Ubisoft released a game that looked like a moving painting. A game that told a whimsical, almost fairy tale-like story. On December 2, 2008, Prince of Persia arrived on the PlayStation 3 in North America. And it not only bucked the dark and gritty aesthetic of Warrior Within, but also the trends of the time. Again, this game was not a sequel, but a reboot. It was in fact the second reboot of the series, and as it released on the 7th console generation, it was also the 7th main game in the franchise, establishing an entirely new continuity with a new prince and a new companion. Developed by Ubisoft Montreal, the same studio that had created Assassin's Creed and the acclaimed Sands of Time trilogy, this clean slate approach was both a creative and corporate decision. The bold, cel-shaded art style and vibrant color palette were not merely aesthetic choices, they were a deliberate statement that positioned the game as a countercultural artifact, a poetic escape from a world that often felt like it was falling apart. The decision to completely reboot a beloved franchise was not made lightly. According to Jean-Christophe Guillot, the creative director on the project, the team felt that the Sands of Time trilogy they had envisioned was complete, and they had closed the story of the prince. With the transition to next-gen hardware, a new cycle felt appropriate, or at least that was the public-facing reason at the time. The real, and arguably more fascinating motivation lay within the company's walls. The immense and unexpected success of Ubisoft Montreal's other major franchise, Assassin's Creed, was starting to pose a strategic problem. The open-world urban exploration and acrobatic gameplay of Assassin's Creed was beginning to cannibalize Prince of Persia. A new direction was necessary to allow the two brands to coexist. The internal schism ran even deeper. The core team that had developed the Sands of Time had already moved on to develop what would become the first Assassin's Creed, creating a creative vacuum for a new Prince of Persia with a distinct new vision. The new team, which included veterans like level designer Michael McIntyre, brought back familiar elements like the rewind mechanic, but without the Dagger of Time. The creative DNA of Prince of Persia 2008 was forged by a team with deep roots in the franchise. Jean-Christophe Guillot, the creative director, had previously held the same role on the acclaimed Warrior Within and The Two Thrones. Michael McIntyre, a level designer on the 2008 game, is currently the game director for the upcoming Sands of Time remake, highlighting the generational continuity within the studio. Their guiding question for Prince of Persia 2008's emotional core was, could you betray someone out of love? This question is the central theme of the game's plot. The story follows a charismatic, vagabond thief prince searching for his lost donkey. In a bit of fan service, his donkey is named Farah, and she has all his gold. So while our fake prince is searching for a super-rich Jenny named Farah, he gets caught up in a sandstorm and falls down a cliff, only to be unexpectedly mounted by the magical Princess Elika.
Hi.
Just a quick heads up, since I'm doing a deep dive retrospective, I'll be discussing major plot points and endings. If you haven't played this yet, you might want to jump to the gameplay chapter to avoid story spoilers. Over the course of the game, and as the prince and Elika's bond grows, she reveals that she is the last of a magical race called the Ura, and her father, in his grief over her death, made a deal with the evil god of darkness Ahriman to bring her back to life. In exchange, he released Ahriman from his imprisonment, unleashing a dark and gooey corruption across the land. The prince, of course, is now roped into the fairly common narrative trope of the reluctant hero. He, with Elika's help, must travel to various fertile grounds to cleanse the corruption and restore life to the land. After cleansing all the fertile grounds, they return to the main temple to fully imprison Ahriman. However, to do so, Elika must sacrifice her life. While it took me several attempts, she eventually succeeds. and Ahriman is sealed away once more. The credits roll as the prince carries Elika's lifeless body away. Driven by what we presume is love, the prince is tempted by Ahriman to undo everything he and Elika worked for in order to bring her back to life. The player, controlling the prince, must then chop down the 4 trees of light to destroy the fertile grounds they just healed. After emulating Daddy and freeing Ahriman again, the game concludes with the prince carrying a resurrected Elika into the desert, leaving the world to be consumed by darkness. This ending, which forced the player to betray the game's entire premise for the sake of a character, was a bold and controversial narrative choice. But Prince of Persia 2008's story is less about some grand quest to save the world and more about the relationship that develops between its 2 protagonists, with the shallow plot, thankfully, taking a backseat to their growing connection.
The Prince of Persia from 2008 is my favorite Prince of Persia game and one of my favorite games of all time. It helped me get through a lot of stressful times, including a career change, planning my wedding, and moving to another country. I first played it in late 2023. I had heard mixed things, but the moment I loaded into the main menu, I knew I was going to love it. The art style immediately struck me as gorgeous and one of a kind, not to mention the ethereal music. As simple as the story was, it has stuck with me in a way that few other games have. I particularly love that the story took a backseat, and the game focused on the 2 leads and their growing relationship. This was particularly impactful because I could draw so many parallels between the prince and Elika's relationship and my own relationship with my now husband, except, of course, that our relationship didn't end with the world destroyed. My husband and I have always loved to banter and lightly tease each other, so that was the first parallel I noticed. Similar to the prince and Elika, my husband tends to be more practical, while I'm more idealistic and prone to seeing things in black and white. As I progressed, I noticed how dependent they became on each other despite their differences, much like how I view my own relationship as a partnership. I love this game to bits, and it still hurts my heart just a little that Ubisoft never continued the story. Over time, I've grown to accept the game's story as complete, albeit tragic, but I still wouldn't say no to a sequel. The game was certainly an escape for me during those difficult times. I love turning it on and becoming completely immersed in the world of the aura. It wasn't just the game itself, it also inspired me to create fan art, which was another form of escape for me.
The core gameplay loop was built around a non-linear open-world structure. The temple, serving as the central hub, branches out into 4 distinct regions that the player can approach in any order they choose, though, as always, player freedom comes at a cost. In terms of storytelling, the best narratives need to be linear. You can't build as much suspense or narrative momentum if the player can encounter all the story beats in any order. The platforming mechanics are centered on autonomous platforming, where the prince performs fluid, almost automatic acrobatic moves with a single button press. Progress is gated by light seeds, a currency for unlocking Elika's new magical powers and accessing new areas. The developers clearly intended for players to take time exploring these unique and often beautiful biomes, becoming immersed in the world they'd crafted. However, this design choice created a frustrating grind for players who wanted to follow the story's momentum. You couldn't simply pursue the main narrative without stopping to hunt for seeds, breaking up the pacing and forcing exploration that felt more like busy work than discovery. The combat and traversal mechanics in the game felt to some like constant QuickTime events. In general, the fights could feel tedious and lacked the deep mechanics of fighting games from which they drew inspiration. The developers attempted to do away with trash mobs by focusing more on one-on-one duels, but these fights often required similar strategies, which ultimately made them feel repetitive. One notable exception was the fight against the warrior, who, unlike other bosses, could not be harmed by direct attacks. The battle was more of a puzzle, where the player had to use a combination of Elika's magic attacks and environmental hazards to defeat him. Another controversial design choice was the no-death system. The prince can never truly die. If he fails at a platforming section and begins to fall, Elika magically saves him and resets him to the last flat piece of ground. And if he's about to suffer a deadly blow from an enemy, Elika will come to the rescue, while also restoring some of the enemy's health in the process. I guess she believes in a fair fight? This system was widely lambasted by critics and fans as a sign of the game being too easy and catering to a casual audience. However, this criticism largely missed the point of the design. The system functions much like a standard checkpoint system, just without a game over screen. The developer's goal was to maintain a continuous flow state for the player, focusing on uninterrupted motion and complex traversal puzzles rather than pixel-perfect jumps. The true challenge lay not in surviving individual encounters, but in executing complex sequences flawlessly. This deliberate shift in design philosophy from a traditional fail state to a continuous flow state was a smart, albeit polarizing idea that was likely misunderstood at the time. My research has revealed frequent mentions of Ico's influence on Prince of Persia, and the similarities are indeed striking. Both games center on vulnerable companion relationships that drive gameplay and narrative alike. Like Ico's hand-holding mechanic with Yorda, the prince's partnership with Elika creates an emotional bond through cooperative traversal and mutual dependence. Just as Prince of Persia relies on Elika to open corrupted gates and activate magical plates, Yorda possesses unique mystical abilities crucial for progression through the castle. She alone can open specific stone gates, making Ico's advancement impossible without her presence. This interdependence extends to the save system. The player can only save when both Ico and Yorda rest together on stone benches, mechanically reinforcing their constant need for each other. While Ico serves as protector, leading Yorda through the treacherous castle and fighting shadow creatures, he remains equally reliant on her for progression. Their mutual dependency forms the core of their relationship, emphasized through constant hand-holding and seamless teamwork. Both games prioritize atmospheric storytelling and environmental narrative over traditional combat, using companion dynamics to create intimate, melancholic experiences that feel more like interactive fairy tales than conventional action adventures. However, their storytelling philosophies differ significantly. Ico's minimalist approach leaves much unsaid, relying on subtext and suggestion to convey meaning. Prince of Persia opts for more direct character development through dialogue and cutscenes, and presents the relationship between its protagonists as romantic rather than purely protective. Both games succeed in making players genuinely care about their AI companions, but through contrasting methods. In Ico, it's through silence and implication. In Prince of Persia, through conversation and chemistry. While playing through Prince of Persia, I noticed striking similarities with Okami, particularly in their approach to art and the cleansing mechanic. Both games feature distinctive stylized art directions that set them apart from their contemporaries. Okami is renowned for its Japanese ink-wash painting style, rendering the world with vibrant colors, thick black outlines, and paper-like textures. Similarly, Prince of Persia employs a cel-shaded, painterly aesthetic that gives its desert environments an almost hand-drawn quality. Both titles deliberately chose these artistic approaches not merely for visual appeal, but to create timeless aesthetics that would age more gracefully than realistic graphics. Beyond the visuals, both games share a core theme of world restoration. In Okami, the sun goddess Amaterasu, manifested as a wolf, uses her celestial brush to literally paint life back into blighted landscapes. Prince of Persia follows a similar pattern as the prince and Elika journey to fertile grounds, cleansing them of Ahriman's corruption and visually transforming dark, desolate environments into vibrant, living worlds. Both games feature stunning transformation sequences that serve as visual rewards for the player's efforts. Okami's flourishing blooms and returning wildlife, and Prince of Persia's dramatic shift from shadow to light as corrupted areas burst into colorful life. This healing the world mechanic forms a central, rewarding gameplay loop in both titles, making environmental restoration feel both mechanically satisfying and narratively meaningful. The auditory experience of Prince of Persia 2008 was a significant component of its unique identity. The game's original soundtrack was officially released shortly after the game itself, on December 18, 2008. Prince of Persia's score was a collaborative effort between renowned video game composer E. Nonzur, serving as lead composer, and Canadian rocker Stuart Chatwood, known for his work with the band The Tea Party. And while I've never heard of Boot them until now, they sold over 3 million records worldwide, including 4 double platinum awards, 1 platinum, and 4 gold albums in Canada. This was not Chatwood and Zur's first collaboration on the Prince of Persia franchise. They had previously teamed up for the scores of Prince of Persia, Warrior Within, and The Two Thrones. For this particular installment, Zur and Chatwood adopted a distinctive musical approach, characterized by a fusion of Eastern ethnic instrumentation with a cinematic orchestral approach. They even went so far as to craft different musical treatments tailored to each of the game's 4 distinct lands. The musical direction in Prince of Persia 2008, with its emphasis on warm, fairy tale-ish flutes, zurna, strings, and ethereal ambient whooshing, consciously diverged from previous, more action-heavy scores. The charismatic, albeit sometimes sarcastic, Prince was voiced by the prolific and widely recognized Nolan North. North provided his voiceover talent to roughly 3 bajillion major video games from the PlayStation 3 era, making his performance instantly recognizable to many players. His indispensable companion Elika was voiced by Carrie Walgren, another veteran voice actress known for her extensive work across animation and video games. In a notable move to enhance their on-screen chemistry and the natural flow of their dialogue, Nolan North revealed in a 2013 interview that he and Walgren recorded their lines together in the same room. This collaborative recording process likely contributed to the dynamic and often praised rapport between the Prince and Elika, making their constant banter and shared journey feel more authentic. The marketing campaign was driven by a memorable E3 trailer that cemented the game's distinct ethereal tone. The trailer, set to the song Seglapur by the Icelandic band Sigur Rós, was a masterstroke that captured the game's artistic vision and created a strong emotional connection with many viewers. I remember the first time I got my hands on this game. I was probably around 13 and I'd saved up my lunch money to buy it. I walked to the video game store on my own, and when I saw it on the shelf, I was reminded of the great emotional moments from Sands of Time. At that time, the only one I had played was the one my friend had lent me. I grabbed it and practically ran home. I booted up my old laptop and put in the disc. The game ran like absolute crap. The laptop struggled with even the initial cutscene, but I was mesmerized and didn't care that the game was running at 10 frames per second. I was so into the cheeky prints and the unique art style, and I loved that my actions were changing the world for the better. The ending broke me, and when it was my turn, I hit the life trees with real anger, just wanting Elika back. I still replay it from time to time, and it never fails. The game's reception at launch was, to put it mildly, a mixed bag. Critics were generally favorable, with the PlayStation 3 version receiving a Metascore of 85 and a majority of reviews being positive. It was widely praised for its unique art direction and ambitious design, winning awards for Outstanding Achievement in Animation and Best Visual Art. However, the user score was mixed or average at 7.4, with a significant number of fans feeling alienated by the simplified gameplay and lack of challenge. The divergence between critic and fan scores can be attributed to a fundamental mismatch between the game's purpose and audience expectations. Critics, who often look for design innovation and artistic vision, recognize the game's bold direction. Some fans, however, felt a sense of betrayal because it was a shell of the former franchise, with simplified combat and a lack of traditional punishment. This game's core design philosophy, focusing on a continuous, uninterrupted flow, feels much more at home in the modern era of gaming, perhaps suggesting it was ahead of its time. For a dedicated PS3 collector like us here at Expedition PS3, Prince of Persia 2008 is a highly accessible and affordable title. Standard pre-owned copies on the used market are readily available, typically selling for between $6 and $15, with prices varying based on the item's condition and whether it is complete in box with the manual and original case. For the more discerning collector, there is the limited edition. This version was released on the same day as the standard edition at a price of $59.99. The bonus disc includes the game's soundtrack, a making-of featurette, and a digital art book. This limited edition is less common but still appears on the used market, with prices fetching a premium over the standard release. Getting this game felt like entering a brand new world where I could explore as the newly crowned prince. After defeating Dahaka and the Vizier in the Sands of Time series, this was a fresh start for me, a deep dive into new Persian mythology. I was totally blown away. I stayed up all night to fully complete the game, finding every light seed. Apart from the awesome new ways to platform, the story and character interaction really stood out to me. The story's build-up was so lovely that I was sad when it was over. I wanted more, which inspired me to create my own version. It was never fully completed, but it helped me take some good inspiration from it. I wish my game had received more attention, recognition, and development time to reach its full potential. The main reason I chose to create an indie follow-up was the story's cliffhanger. I wanted to explore what might happen after Elika left the prince alone with Ahriman. Then I played The Fallen King. The level of graphics and the different device was another major cliffhanger, but also a spark for me. I figured if the story could be continued like this, why not explore my own version, following the events, characters, and lore of the game? Prince of Persia 2008 stands as a beautiful, flawed, and profoundly ambitious experiment. It was a game that dared to be different in a time that celebrated conformity. It chose a poetic art style over gritty realism, a story of emotional sacrifice over a traditional hero's journey, and a controversial, character-driven ending over a triumphant one. In a post-Journey and post-Celeste world, its focus on fluid traversal and an absence of punishing fail states feels remarkably prescient. The game's legacy is not as a commercial success for the franchise, but as a profound creative success that left a lasting mark on gaming. It demonstrated a willingness to challenge convention and prioritize a unique artistic vision, even if that meant alienating a part of its audience. The game proved that sometimes the most memorable titles are not the ones that perfectly stick the landing, but the ones that take a spectacular leap of faith. Thank you so much for joining us on our first retrospective for our first game in our PlayStation 3 collection. If you found any of this entertaining or valuable, or you just like Mr. Tungstone, please like, subscribe, and click the little bell thingy. Catch you on the flip side.